African American art yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Here We Are. I'm your host, Tia Margaret, and African American art is what we'll be talking about on our show today. My guests are Miss Jeannie Washington, an artist from the Chicago area. My second guest is definitely a legend in her own time. She is the founder of the Southern Museum. Her name is Dr. Margaret Burroughs. And my third guest is Jomo Cheatham. He is a student at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Thank you all and welcome to our show. I guess it would be appropriate to, the first question to ask to lay some groundwork is to define African American art. So don't everybody crowd. We can start with you. You seem like you're about to gear up.
African American art? Well, I'm not sure that you can define, say, necessary African American art because African Americans paint in so many different styles. You might look at a piece of African American art and think it was painted by European because of the style the artist took, if they want to make it similar to a Rembrandt style, or if Cubism. It's so versatile.
So what you're saying?
But you know what? I do find that many African Americans use very strong colors, which may be somewhat different, say, than from Oriental, which their painting is very light, very delicate. So each, whatever the style, is terrific. So I do think African Americans use very strong colors, like bold strokes, not to stereotype, but this is one thing I have noticed about African American art.
Well, I think when you say, I think there's no such thing as African American art.
Okay, that's
what you're talking about is art. Right. Art is universal. There is art that is done by people of African descent who are living in America. There's art done by Italians, Irish, or whatever. But we must understand that art itself is universal, and there's no such, you know, like I think during the '60s they were talking about, is there black art? You know, is there something special about black art? I think, as Jenny says, that there may be, but this can't be in all cases. There's certain things that we can notice that comes out in our work generally. That is of a heightened interest in color, making things more colorful, or maybe making more rhythm and design because of the fact that we have this rhythm and design in our music and our dance and so forth and so on. But then there are other African Americans whose work is not like that. It has no rhythm, it has no design, it has no bright colors and monotones and so forth and so on, just like many of the Western artists do. So, well,
it's kind of individual.
That's it to get started.
And perhaps they're all saying African American art because they are thinking of the subject matter. They may be saying, well, we're looking for African American art because they're looking for Africans painted about African children or African history. So I think perhaps in their definition of saying we're looking for African American art, they're really looking for a particular subject more than any kind of style.
You've also had European artists who painted black subject matter exclusively. You've had
but that's kind of rare.
One Mexican artist, Miguel Covarrubias, who dealt mainly in painting black people and black. You know, you've had George Bellows, the guy that painted the paintings of the boxers, the black boxers, and all like that. So I mean, it isn't just the subject matter because many European artists have dealt specifically in black subject matter.
Okay, I'm going to let you get to...
you think we're going to let him say something?
Yeah, I was going to let him say something that I was going to bring my point up, but go ahead.
No, I was just going to throw in there that once you say African American art, that kind of pigeonholes the entire prospect of art from our point of view right there. I mean, you have African American artists, but you know, to say African American art, that's almost something that's non-existent.
That's right.
Africans create art just as other Europeans create art, just as Asians create art. We create art. That's what we do. That's what it's all about.
Well, argument with that is when people generally talk about art, they put labels on it: European art, African American art, Asian art. And what I'm getting from you all is that I mean, you can't put a label on it.
Who labels?
Right. Okay. So that's the question of where. I mean.
But you know what? I think people will say this because if someone come to me and say, I'm looking for some African American art, I'll go back to what I said. They're looking for
art by African Americans.
By African American.
Right.
And maybe with an African American
Theme.
subject matter. Because they may say, I want something to put in my children's room, and they want a picture about little African children.
That's what they mean.
Or they might want, so they're not getting prolonged with their definition of trying to say, well, I'm trying to find really a painting about the kings of Africa. They just say, I'm looking for African American art, or I'm looking for some African black art. This is the way quite often they, and I think they're basically looking perhaps for an African American artist or a black artist that paint, you know, black subject matter. And this is the way they define it. You know, they just say, Jenny, do you have any African American art? Because I paint, personally, I paint everything. I paint seascape, landscape, still life. I can illustrate books, which you will see later. I have a friend who paints, I can't think of her name, but she paints basically landscapes very along the line of some of your European artists. This what pleases the artist too is way many artists express their work in their work.
I'm glad you brought that up because I had the opportunity to speak to different artists in preparing for this show, and one thing I think the consensus, and you were in there with that meeting as well, the consensus of the people were that a lot of people who don't consider themselves artists, and we'll get into that as well, they feel that the average person is confused about exactly what it is. You know, and like this is an aspect here, you know, that you shouldn't label it, if I'm, you know, gathering what you're saying correctly, and I'm glad that that was brought out. But you had a comment that you wanted to make, Jomo.
No, I just want to say that, and it's just so difficult once you say African American art, because you can take someone, a well-known artist by the general population, basically, Norman Rockwell or something like that. He did one painting where there was an African family moving into a neighborhood or something like that. That's African American art because it had an African American theme. But would you call that African American art since it was not done by an African American? So, you know, it has all these different connotations that you can crisscross into, and, you know, you can run into you can go down a lot of blind alleys once you say African American art, which, you know, I hear it all the time, but I just don't understand it, but hey, that's me.
Okay.
It's art by African Americans.
Exactly.
Okay, arts by African Americans.
So I guess our job as artists and patrons of the art is just to explain to people what is, well, I don't know.
Because that would be another question. I mean, what is the responsibility? What do you feel as artists are your responsibilities?
Well, I think artists should educate. Margaret Burroughs taught in the Chicago public school system, and she retired from one aspect of education, but she is constantly teaching. Great inspiration for all of us, and young people should take a lesson and watch people of the Margaret Burroughs caliber, which are constantly working. I always think of Margaret as well, everybody else is trying to figure out, well, should I pick up the ball and run with it? Margaret's taking the ball and gone
on to the next level.
Do with it, while somebody else is trying to figure out whether they should even pick up the ball. So this is a lesson I find great inspiration from.
That's one problem I have with, and it's not a hostile problem that I have, but once people say that, especially African artists, should only educate. And you didn't say only, but I understand a lot of people feel they should only educate. I and certain other artists feel that they should educate, so that's fine. But once you get into the a different sector of the community that feels that they should do art for their own therapeutic or their own enlightenment, so on and so forth, that's fine. But once you only say or pigeonhole education of art, I mean, that's kind of like that. By Africans, that just generalizes everything that's always pushed upon us, like African artists should only do this, or African artists only do that, like they only do abstractions, only do non-representational, only do black people or something like that.
I think it's interesting that whether we like it or not, whether we are aware of it or not, we are teaching. Because whatever you're doing, someone's going to pick up on it. But I don't have anything against artists painting, you know, whatever they feel, because this is also where you learn, because you want the artist to express himself, because the artist can express only the way they can. So that's okay. I feel that's okay. Whatever it is, whatever you want to express in your work, and whatever you're feeling about life, I think one can learn from it. I don't think artists should. I think artists should be free spirits and just express.
Because once you get too, I just feel once you get too intellectual, which is basically a European aspect, once you get too intellectual about anything, once you intellectualize, if that's even a word, something to death, you kill the essence of it. And I think that's something that African people just try not to do. They don't kill the essence of whatever it is that they do.
You said they let it speak for itself.
Exactly, and they let it flow. I mean, we don't, like I said, we don't put, once I asked you a question earlier, who puts things in categories? Europeans put things in categories. We don't necessarily do that. We just go with the flow. We do what we have to do, and we let it speak for itself, basically.
Okay. Dr. Burroughs, I'm going to address the question to you. What do you feel is your responsibility as an artist to people that view, I mean, because let's face it, millions of people have viewed your art.
I'm sorry that you asked that question.
Oh, no, we're interested. This ought to be good.
Okay.
Well,
It's time
in
to
the
go.
first place, I feel that an artist should be free to express themselves doing anything they want to do. But I feel that an African-American artist, as long as we suffer this racism and everything like that we suffer in this country and in the world, I feel that the responsibility of an African-American artist is to create a work of art, a painting, or a sculpture, whatever it is. Whatever they do should make a statement a positive statement for the liberation of our people. Now, that's just what I believe.
And I agree
now,
with that.
some people will say, well, that's propaganda, because I remember when I was at the Art Institute, and we were doing, some of us were trying to make statements. This is back into the 50s and the 60s. We were trying to make statements, you know, against lynching or against some of these horrible things that happened to us. We were told by the professors and all, they sneered at that. They looked down upon that. They said, well, that's propaganda. So that made you think, well, that wasn't good because it was propaganda, because it said something, it had a meaning. And the things that they praised and all was all of that Jackson Pollock stuff where you throw the stuff at the canvas and throw it on the floor and roll it and everything like that.
Okay, they appreciated that.
Utterly
Conceptual
meaningless.
stuff, yeah.
And those were the things they encouraged, and those are the things that they gave the high grades to. But some of us had enough integrity to just stick to our aim and to continue doing things. And that's what I have tried to do all of my life in my work, to make statements. And I'm so happy that my student, Jeannie Washington, has come along, and she's making statements that can be understood, and are making a statement in favor of our people. So that is what I feel. Now, you know, they will praise certain, like Jackson Pollock and all that. And unfortunately, I guess you probably noticed it too, Jomo, that some of your young black students down there at the Art Institute, they're going in that direction of non-objective expressionism, non-objective, you know. It don't say nothing, it doesn't mean anything and all like that. But I just don't think that it should go. I think that my paint and paper and canvas is worth too much for me to waste it on something that says nothing.
That's true.
That makes no statement.
You know what? Which reminds me, I always kind of think of, you may know the story of the Emperor's New Clothes.
Yes, yes, yes.
And when they're standing there, unless there's something there I don't know about, but when they're saying an ooh and ahing, a dot on a
Nothing.
something, and it's like, well, you remember the Emperor's New Clothes. Everybody was saying, oh, how beautiful. Here he was, only this little child
And there
said,
was nothing
he's
there.
naked.
There's
You
nothing
know, and
there.
everybody's saying, oh, and ah, and how beautiful your clothes are. And so I often think of that, and I'm saying, am I missing something? You know, I'm seeing only a dot here. Is that art? You know, so I prefer my work to say something to people can relate to. You know, that's why I think paintings, most often, unless they're just trying to match the couch with a design, color or something, but when someone I find that most of my paintings will sell if it's something people can relate to. You know, say, oh, there's an Annie Lee. Margaret, I don't know if you
I'm familiar with Miss Lee.
have seen some of her.
Is that the primitive lady?
Art.
Yes.
That folk artist?
Yeah, now she does kind of folk art. And then she can paint realism.
But,
And some of her-
if folk art is what is selling, sometimes people would paint folk art.
Well, you know what I think it is I bought a little sketch where the lady was doing hair. And my daughter does hair, and I bought it for her because it was like,
relate to it.
it was, she was doing like this, you're hurting my hair. And quite often when I notice my daughter's doing her hair, sometimes somebody will say, oop. And it's sort of human interest.
So,
Or some of the one like Margaret has a picture of a painting or linoleum cut of children, children jumping rope.
I guess you would call that a genre painting. Let's get some of these fancy terms in here.
Genre?
Jomo, G-E-N-R-E.
We're educating, so.
And it's where you do scenes of people's everyday life, things that they do and all.
Yeah.
I mean, all that
Human interest.
is quite legitimate, I think.
And as artists, we're also recorders of history. If we look in the books of periods, we will see that back in the 18th century, how people dressed. So maybe children in the next century will see how we dressed.
Well, I
now,
think-
if it's some of our or events that happen, say, sometimes when you're making history, you're not aware of it, like the Harold Washington, the most dynamic mayor the city has ever had, or Jesse Jackson, because these are some of our fine leaders. And because we are in the process of history making, we are not sometimes not seem to be aware that we're making history.
I think Jenny, a poet, has written, I can't remember the name of the poet, that all else passes, art alone endures.
That's true.
All else passes, art alone endures. The only way that we can tell about what happened centuries ago, what happened in Egypt 5,000 years ago, is in its art. We read it in its art. And so it is, this is the role that the artist plays. As you correctly said, that the artist is the recorder, the artist is the historian. And in Africa, in our ancestral land, that is the role that the artist played. And so that is the importance of art.
Exactly, and once people realize, especially in our community, the importance that art has played in the past. As Dr. Burroughs stated, the only reason we know anything about ancient cultures is because of the art that we see, the art, the architecture, the art that is expressed through literature. You know, we were talking about that before the show started. And once you realize the importance that art has played in the history of human development, then you can somewhat respect, more so than the respect that American artists, period, are now receiving, the value of what artists do. And then once you realize that respect as an artist, it should influence your work so that you would want to do and focus on something and say something other than just as a Jackson Pollock, who has some talent, I would say he has some talent, but I don't know if it's because I am an African, I just don't entirely get his message. You know, maybe it's
I just
European
noticed
thing.
in this book by Barbara Julian Dean called Sparrow, the name of her book is Open Door, Open Mind, a selection of African American poetry, with the cover and illustrations by Jeannie Washington here. But I just happened to, as I was glancing through this, to find a poem that sort of speaks to the point of what we're talking about. Would you like to hear it?
Sure.
And she calls it Nobody Knows. When we remember the shame and degradation that was our lot in the past, we can look with pride at the black brothers and sisters today whose success has outshone the color of their skin. But now we must begin to teach our children to strive, not in spite of their blackness, but because of it. For who but the black artist can truly paint a picture of the beauty of being black? And who but the black writer can truly depict the black experience? And who but the black singer can truly express our soul? And who but the black historian can truly record what we and our fathers have seen? Who? Quite apropos.
And I'm glad that they had that entry in there about black writers, because I can't speak much on black art, but I can
Tell
about
us
black
about the
writing.
writers.
But you know, leads to my next question. Now, I'm a journalist, okay?
Right.
And even though I went to school to be a journalist, I knew at a very young age that I wanted to write, okay, that I had ability to write, okay? It was then when I deemed myself a writer that I became a writer, okay? I went to school to sharpen my skills, just like I know you all had formal training at institutions of higher learning, high school, how to sharpen your skills in art. But I am a firm believer that with journalism, that you are a journalist when you state yourself as being one, and you will be one until you decide you are not. Can you take that and relate that in the same terms with artists?
Absolutely. I mean, being a journalist is you're an artist, except your medium is words, and your words are directed toward recording the events of the happenings of the community and everything, translating it to the press, to the printed media. So you are an artist, and your medium is words.
When, at what stage, like I said, when I was young, goodness, grammar school for me. When did each of you realize that this was your niche? You know, this was...
The role we're destined to play?
Yeah.
And
Well, if you want to start with me, since I'm the senior here.
And definitely a legend in your own time.
You see, I was the youngest of 3 daughters, and I think at an early age, maybe 5 or 6 years old, I guess because I really believe that these talents are born into you, you know, whether it's writing or art or dance or drama or whatever it is. And my mother noticed that I was always doing these scribbles, you know. You know, my sisters were doing other things, but I was, you know, was more visually oriented, you know, and I would be looking in the clouds, and I could see all kinds of figures in the clouds, right, Jenny? Look in the water, I could see all kinds of figures in the water.
So I think people think artists are weird.
Look in the bushes, I can see figures in the bushes, you know, everything like that. See, because that's that imagination. And so at 5 or 6 years old, they noticed it, and it was sort of encouraged, you know. And I would like to cite the example of my close personal friend Gwendolyn Brooks, who is my age mate. And when she was 7 years old, her parents noticed that she was scribbling these lines, you know. And they encouraged her. They didn't say, stop that and go wash those dishes. They encouraged her, you know, and they took her to hear Langston Hughes and James Weldon Johnson when he came here, and they encouraged her in every way. And I think this is what parents should do. I think that every family should have at least one creative person in it, an artist or a writer or a poet or something like that, and they should encourage that rather than trying to discourage them. And then you will have one, because I think being an artist or a writer or a sculptor or a dancer is the most rewarding experience in the world. Might not make much money, but you're much richer by far than people who have millions.
True.
And it is a God-given talent, too, I must say. Go ahead.
Well, I couldn't help but laugh and feel what Margaret was saying as a child, because maybe when some of the others were out playing, if I couldn't find anything to, quite often, I didn't have any art paper, so I'd look in a book.
Find a blank page.
Most books have a blank page.
Well, we have a lot of artwork up here in Washington.
And I would pull that page out, and I just draw it. I would draw on paper bag, brown paper bag. And of course, once I started, they had that Draw Me, you know, in a magazine, Draw Me. So I'd pull that out of the paper and send for it. My father did pay for it.
Won a prize. Won a prize.
Won a prize.
Okay.
And my father did pay for those classes, correspondence classes. And of course, when I started in elementary school, the teachers saw my talent. They pull me out and have me drawing things on the assembly hall,
bulletin boards.
I didn't find until out later. I remembered working for the school paper, but I didn't know what position. And I still have one paper from way back when, where I was assistant editor of the newspaper in elementary school. And I did all these little drawings.
What elementary school?
John Farron
okay.
Elementary School.
Right across from DuSable.
Across from DuSable High School, where I attended also. And illustrated the graduation programs, and then once I attended DuSable, Margaret was my
And she came
high
to
school
me, she realized she was an artist.
She was fantastic, which I've been working with her off and on for years.
Very proudly that I am the only artist. She didn't know the artist with a face like that. I was her art teacher. The only one.
I attended art school
But I feel very proud of her.
later,
that goes
and
back to-
American Academy of Art. I took classes there. I took classes at the Art Institute. One summer I went to the Art Students League in New York.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Good.
in '77. So most of my classes were art evening classes because I had a family.
That's
where I
right. How many
worked,
kids
went
you
to
have,
school.
Jenny?
I have.
Okay, let's just spill all our personal business.
I
Okay.
have 5 children and
wonderful?
9 grandchildren.
Isn't that wonderful? Look at her.
It's something that you're born with. I mean, because you were saying that before you went to art, you didn't have any formal training as we think of it as, you know, going to school to sharpen your skills. I mean, to be a doctor, you have to go to medical school. To be a dentist,
Stage, having been studying about Africa, I believe it comes down to us in the genes. I think it comes
Okay,
down
genetics.
in the genes.
Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes people are not aware they have talent, where you have the Grandma Moseses and something. They may have had the urge, but suppressed it.
Everyone's had the urge, I would have
Yeah,
to say.
and I would say don't suppress it. If you feel an urge to
Do it.
you are not aware of how you can express your art talent if you don't do whatever it is you want to dance or.
and then also,
And may I just say this too? Out of 5 of my children, 4 of them are artistic.
you know, that goes back to that.
They didn't steal it.
No, they have
Well, I
their
was
own
very-
style. Each one has their own style.
I was very fortunate that I had very supportive parents that supported me in what I was doing. They saw in me, I guess, a lot of what I saw in myself, and they helped to encourage it and to cultivate it for it to grow. But I out with you, Mr. Cheatham, so.
It's almost mirror images. Once you, I guess, once you talk to artists, whatever they say, they're going to be able to relate, just like we were talking about earlier about relating with art. But I, unlike Dr. Burroughs, I had to wash dishes before they started cultivating that talent. So
Sometimes you get that cultivation washing that dish. You
hey,
see
what's
something
this in the water?
You see
Well,
it in the
even
water.
washing dishes can be an art.
And then again, that's what's so strange about art, because everything under the sun has some artistic connotations. It goes from high conceptual art, such as performance dance, whatever. I mean, all the way down to something. Anything can be considered as art, and that's scary and it's powerful in the same instance.
Jomo, could you, I understand, you know, I graduated from the Art Institute
I'm sorry.
back in 1948, before any of you were born. And could you tell us that, I understand they've got something now they call computer art that they're teaching down there, and I want you to explain to us what that is. And then they also have this performance art. So could you tell us about that? What is that?
Let me start with performance
In your
art.
opinion.
Speaking of future art,
Yeah, performance art is a perfect example of how anything can be considered art. I mean, there's a lot of positive things coming out of performance art because it entails a lot of things. It entails video, it entails film, it entails dancing, mixed media,
So
painting.
they combine all that together or
It's
something?
all combined once it's under the realm of performance art. But it can go to something as odd as a gentleman banging a hammer onto a chicken or something like that. It's weird, it's frightening, but anything can be, almost anything can be considered performance art. That's why I say it's a powerful category to place yourself in, to call yourself an artist. But
Do you feel it's exploitative?
It can be, but like I said, it also has some positive context, just like everything under the sun.
So
it
what's
has its
positive about it?
Yeah, let me
Jomo?
go hit a hammer with a
Come on,
chicken. With
I mean, you know, 'cause
What's positive
see, I
about it?
think sometimes these people down, those Europeans, develop all these gimmicks. You know, just like Jackson Pollock standing up on a step ladder with the buckets of paint and throwing it down on the floor, on the canvas was down on the floor, and then Then after it dries, he cuts it up into yard pieces and then sells each piece for $2,000, so forth. And it says absolutely nothing, you know. I want you to tell us a little bit more about that, because I hope that our young black artists will not be taken in by that junk.
Well, you know, of course, I mean, just we're human beings. There are some that will.
Okay, that was
and
my
I swear
question.
to God, you know, it's a little disheartening, but that's why the kind of person that I am, I take heart, because I realize that you have a lot of good artists, a lot of good African artists out there who will and have seen the light and who will be directed in the proper path of what good art, good living is all about. And they'll go down that path, and enough will go down where we don't have to worry about losing an entire generation.
The other will be opportunistic.
Exactly.
And if the money is with the performance of all that junk, they'll go that way, huh? Now tell us about this computer business.
That's actually,
what is this computer-generated art? I want to get hipped.
computer-generated art. That's basically that's art that that uses the mechanics of a computer to create commercial art, fine art, and things of the same ilk. Basically, that's all computer art is. I mean, it can be used commercially. A lot of television stations use computer-generated art. Sports events. What else? Television commercials use computer-generated art, so on and so forth. So it entails, just as art itself, and it entails so much, but I would have to say it has a lot more respectability at this point than performance art.
Now tell me, what is the, how large is the faculty down at the Art Institute, the tenured faculty?
The tenured?
You know, the full-time faculty.
To be perfectly honest, I couldn't tell you what the entire...
Approximately.
Because I only look at the African professors to see who got tenure. That's all I look at. And I think there's only...
Well, how many African-American professors are there with tenure?
I've only seen one.
Only one?
Only one.
And I'm sure there must be at least 100 tenured professors at the Art Institute.
I would... Given the source of who said it, I would have to agree with you,
I just want to
Dr.
bring
Burroughs.
out that point that they are way behind, you know, in hiring black artists or black professors. You know. That's my alma mater, and when I was there, they didn't have anybody there. And a few years ago, when the person painted the distorted picture of Harold Washington, I think the dean called together a group of us who were graduates of that school to ask us our advice as to what should be done. And so I asked him the same question. I said, how many full-time faculty have? 100. I said, how many blacks do you have? He said, 1. I said, well, there's your answer. If you want to get straight, get some more blacks on this faculty, you know, in teaching positions, not just janitors and security, and so forth, so on. But so they can stand a whole lot of improvement, and I hope that somebody associated with the Art Institute might be listening and to do something about it. I understand that Ronnie Hartwell's her name, has just been hired as a department head. Ronnie Hartfield, who was with Urban Gateways. But they can still include some more people other than just clerical people or secretaries and stuff.
A microcosm of the entire United States, the Art Institute. You know, there's injustice there. Lord
I mean,
knows.
it's worse than the entire United States, because only one black tenured professor, and they've got 100 professors.
And it's a very reputable school as well. I know I'm kind of jumping the gun, but
that's all right.
You've been listening.
You may
to
jump.
Him. Okay, you've been listening to him, and I know you've spoken to a lot of other young African American art students. This is the future. What do you think?
What do you mean? What do I think?
I mean, what do you think about the? I guess it would have to go into the circle of the future of African Americans doing art instead of saying African American art.
Right.
Well, of course he's the future, and he seems to have his head screwed on right.
I can't. Where I live it, I can't help but.
He seems to have a good understanding of what the role of the artist is. I'm satisfied about that. He has had a trip back home to find out what things are all about, and he is desirous of going back and further studying about our heritage and culture. So I feel very confident about Jomo.
Well, let's talk about your trip to Africa for a moment. And
well, there is a trip going April 22nd to May 2nd, 10 days. We schedule that because it covers the spring vacation period, hoping that many people who are off during that time might be able to go. Being arranged through Mahogany Travel, which is owned now by Johnson Publishing Company, and you can get the phone number by calling information and asking for Eleanor. And a $200 deposit is required almost immediately if you want to go. We're going to spend 10 days in Ghana. We're going to study Ghanaian culture, because we're taking Ghana because Ghana, we assume, is the area on the West Coast where most of our ancestors came from. We can identify with that. And then we have the African American Heritage Studies. The chairman is Harold Rogers, Professor Harold Rogers. And their address is 19 South LaSalle. And anyone who is interested in getting that schedule can write for a schedule. And they have programs going in July and August. We advertise several programs. We advertise 1 week in Senegal, 2 weeks on the West Coast. We advertise a 2-week trip on the East Coast. That is where you go look at the animals in Kenya and Tanzania. And then we also do Ethiopia, and then we do a cross-Africa program which goes to the West Coast, 2 or 3 countries, then goes to the East Coast, 2 or 3 countries, then goes out from Egypt, so you spend some time in Egypt. And they also advertise, say, 2 weeks exclusively Egypt, you know, where you take a cruise up and down the Nile. And price-wise, it's affordable.
Okay, don't get us in trouble
If you
now.
figure about $1,100 a week, $1,100 a week, you can make it. And you can put the airfare on the credit card. And the point is that even if you put the airfare on the credit card and you take the trip and you come back and you're not able to pay them, you can have pleasant memories while you're sitting in jail. While you sit up in the Cook County Jail. You can think about all the places you've been.
Entrancing yourself.
Yeah, enjoying yourself. But I would hope that everybody, every African American person, and every white person, white European too, because it'd be a good education for them to go to be in a country, be in a continent where they are the minority. They will find out how it feels to be a minority, how we feel all of our lives. And it's a good experience for every African American person to go home and to see how it feels to be in the majority, you know, and to see where Europe and the Western world stole all of its culture from, you see. And you really begin to have proper self-esteem, and you really, when you come back, you'll just be a different person, you know. People ask me, say, why is it you know, you just keep going, you're full of vim, vigor, and vitality. That's because I managed to go back at least once a year, home.
Go back home.
Touch the ground, you know, and get renewed. I come back here and I can fight racists, left and right, whatever you throw at me.
Dr. Burroughs, I don't know if you remember this, but a couple of years ago, I remember you speaking of, in your world travels, that you haven't experienced racism abroad as you have here. Okay, and I guess this is twofold too, and then you may want to comment as well, because as I understand, you went on an African trip with Dr. Burroughs some years back. Well, I don't want to say some, because that makes it seem like you're old.
When did we go? Was that 89?
87, wasn't it?
87.
But the question
When we sent Lou.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you. Would you agree then that, more specifically, African Americans that want to get in the art field, they should be exposed to the African culture? I mean, straight on, not documentaries, reading, that's good, but you should go over there because it's a different flavor. I mean, you learn at a different rate than you would.
No, I should think that I should think that anyone, in particular the artist, should want to go and see as much of all cultures. Go to China, go to Russia, go to the Caribbean, see people everywhere and how they live, and you know, and everything like that. I should think that people would. But your earlier question, you seemed to mention something about racism or something.
Yes.
What is that you asked me?
No, I remember, and I don't remember the exact time, but you were explaining how you had, I think when you just came back from Russia, wasn't it? And you were saying that the type or the level of racism.
Well, I'm trying. What I was probably trying to say was that in socialist countries such as the former Soviet Union, I understand we got to say it's the former Soviet Union now, which is totally, oh, you're surrounded by white people and all, but yet one did not feel the stigma that one feels in this country surrounded by white people, which we will designate as racism. I did not feel that in Cuba, nor in any socialist countries that I've been in, that you were able to just become oblivious of the fact that you were just thinking that you're dealing with people, because apparently, you know, that is not a part of their society. And so that is what I was trying to say there.
Okay, well, I know we kind of got off the art subject, and I wanted to get to some of the art some of the art. There's a book here by, it's called The Open Door, Open Mind, and the illustrations on the cover of it are done by Jeannie Washington. I wanted
And also inside.
Oh, the illustrations throughout the book? Okay,
yes.
Throughout the book are done by Jeannie Washington. I know we had about 9 of them? Oh, okay. I know they're still framed. Okay, and if you wanted to discuss or to talk about that, or I just basically want the audience.
Well, I just want to touch on this. Barbara Dean, Barbara Julian Dean, we call her Sparrow, illustrated this book, and it's been in the making for a while. I had the pleasure of illustrating the cover and at least maybe 9 drawings inside the book. But I would like to see the calendar. I had the pleasure of illustrating for the DuSable Museum in 1983 of Dr. King.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, and each month has a different picture depicting the history of Dr. King's experiences and the civil rights movement and all. And as I said, I worked with Margaret through the years. The museum was founded in 1961,
right.
And I kind of came aboard in 1963. And I painted a series of African-American tribal
That's right. She did our first, see, when we started, we had very little illustrative material to put up on the walls because there wasn't anything. But we commissioned Jeannie, I think we paid her a pittance, to do a whole series of paintings about African culture and all. We got the National Geographic and all the various things, and she enlarged them and all, and they were our first included our first exhibits.
And another series was the African-American history, starting with slavery, series, 2 separate series of paintings, and so and I had the pleasure of coordinating the art fair for the museum.
Right,
for
she
several
started
years.
it. She started it.
And
From something like 78 to 81, and I met a wealth of wonderful artists.
Oh, okay, and this picture behind us, the humanitarian.
Okay, now this painting, it's on display here. It's a print of the original painting that was presented. The original painting is probably something like 28 by 36. Was presented to Margaret at her retirement luncheon. As I say, we know she hasn't retired now, but she just retired from one Pacific
In 1979.
Was that 79?
1979.
Oh, Dr. Burroughs remembers. Don't mess up like that. You don't mess. And you are talking like a very proud teacher.
Oh, yes, I am, because I have students like Jeannie here.
Okay.
I would like to announce that we're going to have, and Jeannie and I just decided upon this, but this painting, we're going to have this made into a print, a poster that will be available for purchase at the DuSable Museum. Jeannie has a picture of me in there surrounded by a group of children, and in the background is the DuSable Museum. And so we will have that in the next couple of months. It should be available.
Okay, and I want to mention that this was talked about on my program, so this is a historical first. We were talking about that earlier. They had discussed this minutes before the program aired.
Right.
Okay,
before you go, I want to mention this too. Another student of Margaret is Walter Williams,
Right.
and he's founded the Ancient Egyptian Museum on 38th in Michigan, which is also not too far from that. The Southside Community Arts Center, which is about 50 years old, one of the oldest African-American art centers perhaps in the world.
It is the oldest in the country. It's 50 years old.
And I understand that you will be celebrating.
Well, we are doing a birthday book for the, I just will do this commercial on your program. We are doing a birthday book for the Southside Community Arts Center's 50th birthday. And we have ads in the book, and the ads range from $5 on up. Full page is $100. And I would hope that people would support the book. I'm extending the deadline until the end of March, so we can get more ads and all. And all you have to do is send your ad and your check to the Southside Arts Center, 3831 South Michigan Avenue. Attention, Dr. Burroughs.
Okay, Dr. Burroughs, I also want you to mention, just for our viewing audience, that this is from a nonprofit organization. So
The Southside Community Arts Center is a nonprofit organization. So is the DuSable Museum of African American History. Any contributions are deductible.
Okay.
And the DuSable Museum wouldn't mind receiving some birthday greetings on occasion of its 30th birthday.
Okay. Okay. I have to protect my gig now, Dr.
Okay.
I want to get to, and this is something I want you particularly to take notice of. Our next piece is by Jomo, Cheatham, and what do you call it, first day of school?
Ponchos, actually.
Okay, it's called Ponchos, forgive me. And it's behind the shoulder, and when they get it queued up, you can tell me, well, I know exactly what it's about. It's a picture of, and I'm proud to say, it's a picture of myself to the left and my cousin on our first day of school. And Jomo, you can talk more about it.
What's it done in?
Pencil and graphite pencil.
Very good.
Just various mediums, various grades of pencil.
I like that.
The only theme of the picture is I happened upon a photograph with my sister and my cousin. And the reason I call it ponchos is because my mother made those ponchos that they're wearing. And that's basically the essence of what it was about. But the reason I executed the picture was because it was my first attempt at anything that realistic or something like that, almost photorealism. So it's just one of the, I call most of my work at this point in my career, for lack of a better word,
It's your career, right?
experiments and sketches, and basically just basic form, trying to learn how to get techniques and forms, that's all.
So briefly, okay, really, briefly, briefly, I mean, tell
It's
me
a
what you think.
little awe-inspiring being
okay,
Dr.
because
Burroughs.
Oh, no, look
What
at
do you-
Jomo.
Like I said, history
going
in
to
the
get
making. History in the
Well,
making.
it's like
She's a legend in her own
Okay, how many
time.
people have you, okay, because I want you to critique it, but how many people on television have you critiqued, their work, have you critiqued?
I don't know. I don't know.
Has it been so many, or you
I
just
don't know
can't
what
think
you
of one?
mean by critique.
Well, I want you to give me your opinion of it.
I'd really, well, do what you
Oh no,
gotta do.
I'm very pleased with what he's doing, and I want to see more of it. And I will have an ongoing interest in his career at the Art Institute and see what he's going to do.
Okay. Okay. I put you on the spot.
No, not at all. But it's one thing that I'm trying to do with my, as I say, career in art, for lack of a better term, is I try not to deal with the European aspects of life in general. In art, you know, that's the field I choose to go into. But I always hear how African artists aren't given the respect that they're due. But who are they looking for the respect from? From the European society. So I'm trying to get away from that, period, in all phases of my life. So what I want to do is become a very successful artist, economically, socially, and so on and so forth. And, you know, I'm dealing with my own people. That's the course that I'm plotting for myself. So it's just a little hard for me to say, just critique the work, because everything's a building process that I'm going on right now. That's all. So.
Well, I would just like to concur with you, because as an artist, my primary audience is not the European art community. I am not concerned with what the Art Institute thinks of my work. I do not enter any of their competitions or anything like that. I am more interested in what the man on the street thinks of my work, and the fact that they will buy it and they will hang it up on their walls. That's why I have been deliberately working with prints and posters, artwork that can be produced and sold for a nominal price, so the working man can afford to hang it up on his wall. And that is what is important to me, not having one painting that is in the Art Institute. And however, I would like to announce that I recently did sell a painting to the Hampton University Museum for $18,000, which practically bowled me over.
But I should be much more.
But I'm taking that money and I'm putting it into producing Jenny's painting into posters so we can have a wide distribution of it. And perhaps there'll be something of yours, Jomo, that we can reproduce and make into prints and all, because I just think that's the most important aspect, to have your work to go out to many of our people.
And Black Success magazine, 1991, you said you'd rather sell to 50,000 individuals at a nominal fee than sell one piece
Right.
at $50,000 or something like that. And that's
However,
what it's all about.
I did have a poster made of that painting that was sold to Hampton University Museum, and it's available at the DuSable Museum in full color for $20. Just that's another commercial.
You know, they've just been blurred out all over the program, but that's okay because this is nonprofit. You're not jeopardizing my gig. But no, my next question would be, who influences you? What influences you?
What influences me?
I mean, Dr. Burroughs, you are a legend in your own time.
Oh, please.
I mean, really? Okay, would you agree with me? Would you agree with me that she is a legend?
Absolutely.
Would you agree with me that she's a legend in her own time? I've talked to many people. You are a legend in your own time. You have to accept it.
Dead.
But you're not dead. I said in your
Dr.
own
Burroughs.
time. I clarified it. You are a legend in your own time, sister, and I know there are many people that will back me up on that one.
Yeah, so you just have to...
You have to accept it. Who influences you? I'm sorry, I couldn't go up and sell an $18,000 painting.
Naturally, going to the Art
You'd be surprised
Institute,
who could.
coming at the art, going to the Art Institute, attending the history of art classes with who teach you mainly about the European artists. You come up, this is the work you know, but then of course there are some of my peers who came up with me at the time, say like a Charles White or Bernard Goss or William Carter or Georgie Neal, some of those that I was very close to, that we all worked very closely together, and I guess we shared things with each other. I would say of the European school that I was very much impressed by Picasso, and I guess the reason why I like Picasso is because he was an experimentalist. He tried different things and all, and I like to try different things and so forth and so on. And I will be having a show, another commercial, in May at Nicole's Gallery, and it will surprise people as to what I am doing, because I'm doing something entirely different. I decided I was old enough to do whatever I wanted to do, to break all the rules and regulations and so forth and so on. So I am doing things that are very colorful and full of design, which I always did like design, and I hope that the people will come out and see those new things.
Okay. Well, I'm sure they will, because so many people watch this show.
Dr. Burroughs brought up, when she happened to mention the price tag, it just got me to thinking about something. When she happened to mention the price tag on her last work that she just sold or something.
I mean, the only one I ever sold for that amount of money.
Amount of money. I mean, Dr. Burroughs is producing quality work. And you talk about Charles White, you talk about Huey Lee Smith, you talk about several African-American artists of note who, even some some average people on the street who don't have a great interest in art know about, like quite a few people know about Charles White. The work that they sell, they're making money. They're making a nice amount of money, but they're not making the amount of money that their European counterparts are making.
Right.
So we have to be about the business of cultivating.
That's right.
The market, for lack of a better word, the market that we exist in, because not that it's all about making money, but it's, once you see what your counterparts
we must support our
exactly,
artists.
Exactly, that's what it's all about.
Okay, that's what we're doing. I want to, before time gets away from us, we have another painting, and it's by Reverend Louis Gray, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. Old Lady Fishing. He's an old friend of our family, and I thought it was actually one of his better pieces. And it's very colorful. I can't really elaborate on it because he never gave me a script for it, but I just felt that since it's been sitting in our house for a long time, that we brought it out for this special show.
Once again, great work. The work by Dr. Gray. Reverend Gray, I mean, some people might call it, some Europeans might call it primitive, but it's good art. And there's a market for that kind of...
We don't use the term primitive.
Exactly. Well, you're right. You're absolutely right, because we sell some African boutiques in our gallery.
We use the term primitive in the sense of primary first, but the Europeans use the word primitive. They're sort of looking down at it, talking down at it. They speak of primitive art.
Exactly.
African art spoken of as primitive art. African art is really primary art because it was art made by the first people to inhabit the earth. Right?
Right.
Okay.
This brings us into geology and all those kind of things.
And we don't want to talk about
we
art
might,
history.
We
at
might
the
want to hear
Institute.
about Zinjanthropus, who was a black man who was the first human being on Earth which developed out of black Africa.
Well, this may
But
seem...
that's subject for another discussion.
Okay, before we run out of time, let me get to our book for this month. The book that we recommend this month is called Maurice Bishop Speaks. It's a book, it's a compiling
there it
of,
is.
I'm sorry, it's on the monitor. It's a compiling of speeches made by the untimely assassinated revolutionary of the New Jewel movement. It's a very informative as well as inspirational book, and we influence and encourage you to read it. This may seem a little self-serving, but Dr. Burroughs, could you pass me that? I want everybody else showing their art.
What do you want?
The stick figure right there.
Aren't
The white
most
figure.
assassinations
You mean this beautiful,
untimely?
Yes,
this beautiful little wire sculpture?
I made this in 10th grade. I made this. I call it the Running Man. I made that in 10th grade. I know, aren't you impressed? I'm a little impressed. But, I made this in 10th grade, and it's the first and probably the last piece of art that
well, it shouldn't be.
I could.
You've got talent.
Well, thank you.
You've got to do some more. Don't you think so, Jomo?
I don't know if it's in it.
She does have
These
talent, but it's
nimble
like a lot
fingers.
of people have talent and they just don't exploit it as they should.
Well, I want to say this, that, I guess many years ago at the 57th Street Art Fair, there was a young artist out there with some wire figures like this. He was selling them for $25.
You know,
His name was Richard Hunt.
I would probably donate something.
I regret that I did not. I thought $25 was too much at the time, and I wished I had bought one or two.
Richard Hunt.
Richard
man.
Hunt, similar to this.
Exactly.
So you should get back to your art. You've got it. It's in
Well,
you.
I kind of leave that
It's
to
in you.
the people.
No, it's in you.
Richard
You'll
Hunt.
never be fully satisfied unless you do it. If it's in you, must come out.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. I think this was a very good program. We hit upon a lot of issues. We hit upon a lot of issues.
A good time was had by all.
Yeah, a good
Yes.
time was had by all.
Thank you for inviting
Thank you
me.
all for coming. Please come again.
Please invite us again,
Okay.
because we can talk about different things next time.
You know what? We talked about a lot of different things today. We did.
Okay.
We did. I mean, more than that, we did. We talked about different
I would love
social
to come
issues.
and do a program of poetry, my poetry,
Okay, you heard that in this program.
original poetry.
Until as always, until the next time, on behalf of our studio here we are. Thank you so much for tuning in.